You have found the right place for the best Notre Dame football analysis. This is Irish Illustrated Insider. I'm Tim Priester with Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated, joined as usual by John Bryce of Football Scoop. It's Monday, August 12th. I have my dates and days set correctly,
Nice.
contrary to last Thursday when I said we were coming back on, anyway, a different time. We're here to talk Notre Dame football. We were at Notre Dame's football practice on Saturday. It was their ninth practice of the preseason. Had an opportunity to see 5 periods of football. I completed my preseason analysis of the offensive line without Charles Jagasa. Hopefully things don't change as they're set right now. We'll talk about that a little bit, but we're also going to talk about the quarterbacks and linebackers. We had an opportunity to visit with the respective position coaches and the players. And Notre Dame also has added a support staff person that John Bryce will tell us about here in a bit. But let's go ahead and start with the offensive line. Tosh Baker at left tackle. It appears that that's the way they're going to start, with Baker at left tackle. Pat Coogan seems to have the edge on Rocco Spindler, but obviously Rocco Spindler has a bunch of experience too, at least from last season. So he'll be in the mix in some way or fashion. Ashton Craig, of course, at center, Billy Schrouth at right guard, and the right tackle is Emil Wagner. Guys, I know we saw a bunch of other stuff, but I'd like to get you guys to weigh in on that situation, as we are now 19 days and counting to the Texas A&M game.
I think we saw a bunch of other stuff because they're 19, 22 days away when we watch practice from the Texas A&M game. They have to build depth from within. That's why Pendleton was taking some guard reps instead of center. Pat Coogan taking center reps because he would be the default second string center. Now, I don't think Lambert at right tackle and Knapp at left tackle has anything to do with building depth from within. That is their depth now. So that's relevant. But a lot of the movement, I think, I keep bringing this up. Remember, Emil Wagner was playing guard last year at this point in the preseason. So they try to find every contingency plan.
This doesn't feel like that, though, Tim. I mean, and
No,
that
I
was
mean,
just,
Pendleton playing
I
guard with the
got you.
first unit
Yeah.
very much feels like Emil Wagner playing guard with the first unit. Pendleton's
I,
not beating out Spindler and Coogan right now.
Yeah, Coogan had tweaked his ankle right before that. They were
Yeah.
working on goal line stuff, and they taped him and put him back in. So I think that might have been what you saw there. But it does say, and I would encourage our subscribers and readers to check out the story that I wrote on the offensive line today. And if you're not a subscriber, you'd want to check that out. Um, yeah, I think Coogan would be, if something would happen to Ashton Craig, I think Coogan is the guy that they would work in there. Then you could slide Spindler back into a starting spot. But it is what it is. I think sometimes maybe we make a little bit too much of it, because I know Notre Dame feels really good about their interior offensive line. I think Emil Wagner has kind of settled into that right tackle spot, and a lot of the questions and concerns and the constant glare on him of, okay, is he doing okay? I think he's settled into that starting spot, and now Tosh Baker's going to have to settle in himself. JB?
Yeah, I think what stood out to me since the Charles Jagasa injury is that Anthony Knapp is the third tackle at this point in time. I believe that they're repping him as much as possible, wanting him to continue to push Tosh Baker. Tosh is the guy who's obviously had the most work there through the years. There's a comfort there that the staff feels with Baker. There's also, I think the staff feeling a bit of Tosh Baker showing them something about his mettle and his determination by still simply being on the Notre Dame roster. When he lost his job in spring, everyone knew he lost his job in the spring, including Tosh, and he stayed around all summer and continued to work and try to get better. But I think that it's right now that Anthony Knapp is the third tackle, whether that would be a situation where they needed a left or a right tackle. Gerby Lambert is fourth. And then if you're talking about the sixth and seventh offensive linemen in general, then you've got Knapp there in the mix, you've got Rocco Spindler in the mix, and you still got Sullivan Absher in the mix, as you saw the other day, guys.
I wonder, and this is part of the story, and that was the whole idea, was to just throw out ideas as to the possibilities beyond what we see as a starting five right now. But I wonder if, certainly in a game, John, I agree with you. If one of the tackles goes down, then Knapp is probably the first guy in ahead of Gerby Lambert right now. But I wonder if it were another long-term injury to the tackle position, if they would turn to an Absher who's 6'7", 321, gives you that size and power. And when I watch those offensive linemen, and you measure who comes off the football the best, I first of all, I'd put Ashton Craig there, despite the fact that he has to snap the football and then proceed forward, and then I'd put Billy Schroth. But I think Sullivan Absher, in terms of coming off with power, is right up there. So I wonder if there were another long-term injury at tackle, whether they would go ahead and make that move and put Absher back at left tackle, which is not out of the blue. He played there all spring.
Let's hope we don't
Yeah,
cross that bridge. That wasn't fun in 2021. Joe
No.
Alt was I talked to somebody, a parent, before the game, before practice on Saturday. Joe Alt was the deep fourth choice. Your normal deep fourth choice isn't Joe Alt. You get to 4, you're in trouble. So let's avoid number 4.
That was a miracle, is what that was. I mean, not that Joe Alt wasn't going to develop, but when you project him that way, and then you finally get to him, and he becomes an All-American in the process, that's a bit miraculous.
And Joe Rudolph talked about the balance of trying to see how much he can push an Anthony Knapp along or a Gerby Lambert along versus continuing to rep and get better Tosh Baker and Emil Wagner. And as you guys have said before, I don't think what we see at Texas A&M is ironclad to be what we see at the end of the month. That assuming, and then that's based on everyone staying healthy. We still don't think it's what we will necessarily see 4 games down the road.
I think it's guaranteed for game 1, though, don't you? Tosh Baker healthy starts, because you're getting near that coaching malpractice thing McCullough joked about. You just can't throw him in there.
Yeah, well, and you're at a certain point, if Gerby Lambert was a little bit stronger and flashing a little bit more, and frankly, I thought he flashed a little bit on Saturday. I think he's going to be a really good football player. But you play the percentages, and Tosh Baker right now, like one of the questions is asking just how good Tosh Baker is in our second segment. He was still the second-rated player in Notre Dame's class of 2020, and I realize that was a ranking, 4 or 5 years ago, and that's all it is now, is just a ranking. But Tosh Baker is still your highest percentage decision by quite a bit going into the first game on the road at Texas A&M.
Yeah, completely agree.
All right, let's on Saturday we had an opportunity to talk to Gino Guidugli, the quarterback's coach, Max Bulla, always entertaining, the linebackers coach, and then of course their respective players at those 2 positions. Guys, who would you like to talk about, and what did you hear that caught your interest?
I think Guidugli, if I may, JB, because he offered something that most fans either are worried about or don't think about. They have 4 really good quarterbacks they have to keep engaged, because you don't want to lose one in the modern era right away. Normally, the third quarterback, if he's not the scout teamer because he doesn't have the skill set, stands around and watches, and the other guy becomes the scout team quarterback. So at some point, you are going to have CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey as a scout team quarterback. Varies by week, I'm sure, on the opponent they're playing, because Angeli is firmly number 2. He said it is incumbent upon him, Guidugli, to make sure all 4 guys are engaged all year, and it's going to be a challenge that they've never done it before, which means the third guy can't be standing there, because you're going to lose him mentally, and they don't want to do that because he's good. Normally, when you lose the third guy mentally, like, well, we lost the third guy mentally. Who cares? He wasn't going to play for us anyway. But he could play for Notre Dame this year. I mean, he could succeed if he was thrust in that position. So that's going to be hard, because there's just Riley Leonard needs more reps with Notre Dame. This isn't, when I saw a thing on the board I disagreed with, they said, does Leonard have a higher ceiling than Ian Book? Of course he does. But Ian Book wouldn't need all these reps right now. He'd be fine giving reps over to other people, because he would know everything going into these final 3 years. It's a tough situation. Of course, it is a much better situation than not knowing who's going in if your quarterback gets hurt.
Yeah, I think that's a tremendous point. I also I visited a little bit more with Max than I did with Gino. But I did pick this up from the offensive visitors that we had, be it Gino or especially Riley Leonard. I asked Riley Leonard because he was asked about how Mike Denbrock had said, hey, what we show at Texas A&M is not going to be the offense we are a week later, 2 weeks later, 4 weeks later, or whatever. And Riley Leonard kind of took exception to that and said, I expect us to be a really good offense at Texas A&M, and that's the standard that I'm going to hold it to. So again, we continue to allude to it. We continue to hear about it. Literally every time we visit with somebody on either side of the ball, we're hearing about the competitiveness of Riley Leonard. I think that also shows the standard that he holds himself to and that he holds his teammates to. And in terms of what I took away from Max Bella, there were two key things. He talked about having 5 guys there that they clearly trust at a very high level. And he also told me point blank that there are some elements of this defense that he thinks have more depth and are more demanding than some of the NFL defenses that he's been around and played in. And I thought that it was really insightful to hear him talk about not only how prepared guys are for the next level in this defense, but just how detailed and how deep this defense is, but also not to a point of bogging it down. And he reiterated the same thing Al Golden told us, and that is they installed the defense 4 times over before they ever opened fall camp. So 4 full installs before they've ever taken the first rep at fall camp. And that's, to have the guys as well versed as possible from the classroom aspect of knowing the playbook so that then it's applicable on the field.
I like Bulla's admission that it's hard to rotate for the player. He said, he goes, man, it's tough. I played every snap. JD, Maris played every snap. You just get in a groove and you play football. Now it's important to rotate for 14-game season and everything. But we're all excited about the rotation. He's like, it's hard to rotate, man, as a player. Like you got to be locked in mentally. Usually, you're not as tired, but mentally, if you're just going in here and there, it's different. It's much different speed of the game thing. And I thought it was a great point back in the day. Drew Tranquil didn't come off the field. Tavon Coney didn't come off the field. Yeah. It was to their detriment as the season went on, but it wasn't to anyone's detriment while they were playing early. They were playing great.
I thought it was interesting. The Bullet said, like we're asking first team, second team, and he's like, I'm out there. I'm just pressing buttons. I'm not thinking who's first, who's second. Right. I'm running these guys in there, and obviously they're all on a similar plane that, they're all in competition. It's always a 1-1A situation, or at least it has been for a couple of weeks for him. So that's a good sign, but young linebackers are young linebackers and they're going to have to learn. I thought it was interesting. JB, you might've been there when CJ Carr, maybe not, when CJ Carr was, somebody asked him whether, because he's up to 210 and he was well below 200 pounds in the spring. And he was asked if, it was tough with Lauren Lando to add those pounds. And he said, no, not at all. It was easy. So his Lando's form of preseason preparation, summer preparation certainly has worked on CJ Carr. You can see he's a little bit bigger, still not, he's a freshman. He's still just a young teenager. But he's getting there, and that's a good sign. It will be difficult to keep 4 guys engaged, Tim. There's no doubt about that. I mean, 40.
I think his point is you just don't want to give up on them.
Well, no, you don't. No, and you want to keep them engaged. Certainly, there's no doubt. But you're right. You don't want to give up on.
Football works, though. You give up on one of them during the year. That's the depth chart. Is the depth chart.
Exactly. Like who wants to? And the guy you would quote give up on right at the moment would be Kenny Minchie, and you don't want to do that. You want him to. Number one, you want him to stay. Number two, you want to build upon some of the really good things that you saw of him at times in the spring. So that's a difficult thing to do. But Bull is a pleasure to talk to.
So was Riley Leonard.
Yeah, Riley Leonard was unbelievable. Bulla is no filter. CJ Carr was awesome. I do want to, you mentioned Kenny Minchie. I think you and I talked about it, TP, the other day outside the Notre Dame Stadium before a video. I just told you how impressed I was with the velo on his throws. You can just see the arm strength that he's gained, even I feel like from spring to now. And he's had a strong arm, but he continues to get stronger and to become more accurate. Quick CJ Carr note that I found really interesting, or a couple of them. I noticed that he had written on his left hand, pressure is an illusion. Yeah. And he said that the quarterbacks all are writing different things on their hands pretty much every day. I couldn't tell what Riley Leonard's hand had said on it. He had some red ink, but it had been sweated off, it appeared. Maybe CJ Carr had used a Sharpie for his, but he said that's something that they're doing. It's just to be mindful. It's just helping them stay in the moment to seize the most that they can from every single practice and every single rep. And then also CJ Carr had invited a bunch of the freshmen and newcomers over to his house here, his family's house here in South Bend, and had a large cookout the other day. And so, that's a neat thing to see a young guy already organizing something like that. And he said he did the bulk of the cooking. I can't remember who else helped him, but thought that was pretty interesting that Chef Carr is already flipping up some burgers.
Speaking of arm strength, Tim, you were probably there when Dooley said he was a bit surprised at
Yeah.
Riley Leonard's arm strength.
He said it was better than he thought, and he said he's faster than he thought. No, he didn't say he's faster than he thought. He said you watch him escape, and he doesn't look like he's moving, but he's running by all the corners and safeties. And you're like, man, that guy must be fast because I can see that. He does have the long stride thing. It's not like the Matt Jones long stride thing we always talk about with tall quarterbacks, but Leonard does gobble up turf in a hurry when he runs. But I want to tell anyone that has not seen a Riley Leonard interview or heard one yet, he had one of the best answers and this is completely genuine. I don't think he has as Bryce and I were talking about it, he doesn't have a disingenuous bone in his body when you see him speak. Someone said to him, do you see any similarities in CJ Carr going back to when you were a freshman at Duke? And he goes, not really any similarities. He's like way, 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 way above where I was as a freshman. Honestly, it's night and day. No, we don't have any similarities. And then they asked him more about Leonard or about CJ Carr. He explained mental preparation, being locked in, all that stuff. And at the end of it, he goes, yeah, there are no similarities. So he's really nice plaudits for CJ Carr, but he was being honest. He's like, no, CJ Carr is way ahead of where I was.
And that's, that's accountability and nothing, few things are more important for any athlete or any human being to have accountability. And he has that. I spoke with Jay Nosberry and we talked about him playing some nickel. And Tim, I'm going to want you to, you wrote about the linebackers today and maybe be concise with it as far as how the breakdown is with the linebackers and who's playing where. And when this guy's on the field, that guy plays that position, et cetera. But Jay Nosberry is such a mature, grounded, down to earth, accountable football player and human being. And I don't, he probably is the guy that has the most difficulty among the five getting on the field in terms of playing time or most consistent playing time. I guess we'll find that out. I think the words from Max Bulla about Jalen Sneed and his development continue to be very, very encouraging. But Tim, just give everybody a brief synopsis of when it's Kaiser and Bowen, when it's Kaiser and whoever, how they break down at linebacker.
Yeah, Bowen and Kingston Viliamu-Asa are the mics. So when it's Bowen, Kaiser would be at the will. When they go nickel, Kaiser would probably move over to what they call Mac, would be the mic. Jalen Sneed would slide out to the will because you don't have a third linebacker. You have the nickel out there. And so if you think about it, that's not just like first down situation where you're trying to do that. That's a true passing situation. And I think you make a great point about Osbury because they play the strong side linebacker position, what people refer to as rover, less than the other two. They play it less than the nickel. That would be Osbury's position. He's no longer working with the nickels because this is good news. They found a backup nickel. Max Bulla mentioned, he said, we didn't know about our freshmen yet, but Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs, I would guess at nickel, are playing well enough where Osbury is now back with the linebackers. I think it's really good news that Osbury is back with the linebackers because he can be the backup rover to Sneed. He can be the backup Will to Kaiser. And he has a skill set to get on the field. But I talked to Kaiser about it. I was like, is being versatile not necessarily ideal for finding a spot? He goes, yeah, this is back in December. He's like, I feel like I never locked down a spot because they could play me anywhere. And I ended up playing less than everybody else because of it. And that's tough because the versatility should be like, great. That should be, you're versatile. You can play anywhere. But we can also take you off the field whenever we want because we have a better Mike, a better Will, and a better something else. So the 5-person rotation, I think KVA backs up Bowen. Osbury backs up Sneed, but Sneed moves over and Kaiser moves over. Right. I think Sneed, this is a Monday musing, is going to be second on snaps behind Kaiser among the linebackers. But I think Jordan Clark gets more than every linebacker.
Now, and that news on Sneed is huge because as soon as you maximize Jalen Sneed's ability, now you really got something on the field.
He speaks glowingly of Jalen Sneed, Max Bull.
I know. And it wasn't the case before, sometime in the spring. Wrapping up this before we cover one more thing, John, Kaiser was, I don't know exactly, I asked the question. I don't know exactly how I got, I was asking him to, just give me a word or two or a phrase about each one of the guys that we're talking about here. And then I said, Jack Kaiser on Jack Kaiser. And he ended up saying, the reason I came back was because I wanted to be the dude. He never had the opportunity to be the dude before. And now he's in that position. And I like that. I mean, that's kind of like saying you don't expect Jack Kaiser to say I'm the man, But that's kind of what he was saying, that, hey, man, I've ascended to this and I deserve this.
Yeah, I was standing there with you when you asked that question, and he gave some really thoughtful, insightful answers as he sort of scouted the rest of his peers there at the linebacker position. And then, yeah, he was a little bashful about it, and you prodded it out of him. And he said, "Yeah, I said if I'm going to come back for a 6 year, let's make it worthwhile. Let's be the dude. Let's be the dude." I thought that statement that Jack was making right there, and then Riley Leonard moments later making that statement about how he really expects them to be a pretty damn good offense at Texas A&M. I'm paraphrasing there, but he made it clear he has high expectations for the offense at A&M. Jack Kaiser has high expectations for himself and the defense. I think that's natural leadership, and I think it's refreshing to hear guys not only wanting that to be the case, but stating it and working and speaking it into existence. A couple other quick notes before we get to the next short topic, TP. Continue to hear really good things about Logan Thomas and Bryce Young, not only flashing in defense, but showing that they're bought in on special teams and making some plays there. Aeneas Williams, we talked a lot about him. He had a great day, but he's flashing in some different areas. And then Leonard Moore, I think Leonard Moore and Hobbs are both showing some things, but maybe Leonard Moore flashing just a little bit more often there for the Irish as part of those newcomers.
Yeah, I'm going to want to talk about Leonard Moore a little bit here in segment 2 with a question. But John, if you'd wrap up segment 1, Notre Dame has added a support staff person, Anthony Treesh.
Yeah, veteran. Yeah, veteran of PFF. He'd been at PFF for 5 years, one of their top collegiate analysts. And it's just Notre Dame continuing to deploy what they're billing an NFL type model. And you've moved Chad Bowden into that GM role where he's got oversight on a lot of things, but he's not as drilled down on, say, the recruiting, because he's doing some stuff in the NIL space. He's very much in lockstep with Marcus Freeman. You bring Treesh in, he's going to do analytics. Those will be self-analytics as well as opponent analytics, some self-scout there. Matt Jansen is now more in charge of evaluations, and a lot of stuff runs through him, and then other people sign off on it. And then, they kept Carter Almond from going to Wisconsin, where he'd been offered the DPP job, and they rehired Caleb Davis after he'd been co-GM at Troy when Dre Brown left for his alma mater, Illinois. It's more resources than Notre Dame has ever poured into that department before. It's also adapting the model to evolve with the times as more and more teams throughout college football are going to that NFL model. And Chad Bowden can't just be locked in to looking at prospects that they might recruit, because he's got to know what's going on in the NIL space. He's got to know what's going on with potential to the transfer portal. There's just a number of different things on his plate. So again, this is Pete Bavacqua, Marcus Freeman, and Chad Bowden, in my opinion, getting exactly on the same page and saying this is another thing that we need for our football program to try and stride forward towards a national championship. So I think it's a big deal. I know in talking with people in the Goog, it's a very big deal. And then I know from the reaction to our story, how many coaches and how many people from around the country weighed in or DM'd me on Twitter and said, this is a good get for Notre Dame. Wow, this is big time. Notre Dame taking a big step there. I worked with this guy at my school. Pittsburgh coach saying I worked with him. Just a number of different people saying they'd worked with Anthony that think that he'll bring a new attention to detail, a new level of drilling down that will help Notre Dame.
So since they lost Dre Brown to Illinois, they've really dialed in on getting the support staff in this area of the program and really solidifying it.
Yeah, and also having elevated Zaire Turner, another one that they've had to hang on to. Not so much specifically this summer, but some programs tried to pry her away. It might have been last summer, and she stayed around. And she really is a valuable yin to the yang of Chad Bowden and the way that they operate.
If you're coming to a game this season, you have to check out Game Day Your Way, Notre Dame's tailgate service provider. Game Day offers everything you need, including tailgate gear, catering, and even beverage delivery right to your spot. And their Irish Express transportation from Chicago allows you to tailgate while you travel to their all-inclusive party zone in South Bend. Let Game Day deal with all the hassle so you can focus on the fun. For tailgates, tickets, transportation, and more, visit gameday.yourway.com. You know what segment 2 is? It's Burning Up the Boards. It's coming up next.
Welcome back to segment 2, Burning Up the Boards. Our first question new subscriber, it seems. 3A Pope Cinnamon III. Given Gabe Rubio's injury and the Howard Cross news, are you more concerned about the defensive or offensive line going into the College Station game? Which depleted unit is more likely to decide/cost the game?
Well, I don't think Notre Dame's defensive line is depleted. There was news, of course, that happened on Saturday. As soon as somebody says, as soon as somebody yells fire, everybody runs out of the room, so to speak. And there was a comment made that Howard Cross injured his foot/ankle later in practice and did not finish practice. We talked about on the instant analysis after practice outside the stadium, and then asked, of course, Notre Dame. Notre Dame came back with the answer that it was a load management issue with Howard Cross, and that's why he didn't finish practice. Somewhere in between is probably reality, total reality, but I don't think we are anticipating Howard Cross having a significant setback here before Texas A&M. He's had the hamstring, and there still is time. If he actually did anything to his foot or ankle, if it's not overly serious, there's still quite a bit of time for him to be ready for Texas A&M.
I still think that it's the offensive line for Notre Dame that will, by and large, determine the success or lack thereof at Texas A&M. That, to me, is the one question mark component. Now, I do think it's worth noting that the Aggies appear to have lost Reuben Owens for the seasons, the really good running back. I actually talked with a NFL scout who was at practice in College Station last week, who raved about the Aggies defense, and before this injury made it clear he really liked their top two running backs. But that was really all that sort of he talked about on the offensive side of the ball, were those two running backs. Clearly, if Owens is lost for the year as feared, then that's a big blow to Texas A&M, and obviously that's something that works a little bit more in Notre Dame's favor, especially for an opening game when you think that field position, ball possession, things of those nature are going to be at an even greater premium than normal.
Tim, what's the reality of the Howard Cross situation?
They desperately need Howard Cross in that game because he isn't just there. He makes plays. He makes people better. He's a big deal. And his backup was Gabriel Rubio. That's the semantics of it. Gabriel Rubio is the backup nose tackle. I know they're different body types, but that's why they complement each other. Cross, if Jason Onye is your third guy, he's a great third guy. If Jason Onye has to play instead of Howard Cross and Gabriel Rubio, he's not as good of a player anymore. That's part of it too. When I heard Cross was hurt, it was worse for me than Jagasa, because Jagasa is all about, oh no, look at that hole. Cross is like, it might be the best player on the team. In college football, he might be the best player on the team. So
if it was a real serious injury,
yes. Oh yeah, then it would be huge.
And we would know that by now.
I doubt it was just 100% resting. I think something happened.
Yeah. Probably true. And no doubt. The Rubio situation, but more Jason Onye, I think he's ready for that. You have Donovan Heinisch, and we've talked about the depth, and we have a question in the second segment where we will go through all the defensive linemen and kind of rate where we think they are.
All those guys are worse though if Howard Cross doesn't take.
Oh, there's no doubt. I'm not making light of that. You have to have Howard Cross. You need Howard Cross on the field every time you play this year. There's no doubt about that. I don't care who you're playing. You need him on the field. So we'll see with that. But, Notre Dame said load management. I think somewhere in between is reality there. But I still think, without a doubt, the offensive line is much more concerning without the depth and or proven depth. We have a question from ND Fan Tweets. Not much is asked or talked about regarding Drake Bowen. What is his ideal position? Is it where Kaiser is playing this year? And what is Drake's first step to being a consistent starter over the next few years?
He's the Mike, right, John? And Will and Jack Kaiser's at the Will. That's where they are now. If you were to just write it down on a depth chart, that's how it would look.
And I know specifically we talked a good bit about Drake Bowen over the weekend, certainly on Saturday's video instant analysis, because I'd been impressed with his work as we watched intently the pass pro drill between linebackers and the running backs. And I think we've all commented to one another, whether we've written it or said it specifically on a podcast. Drake Bowen really looks in good shape. Like, you can tell some changes to his body, and I think he looks more explosive. Again, we're usually seeing about 40 minutes of practice on the days that they're open to us. But I think you see a guy who already had a good frame. He looks even better, and I think he absolutely looks more explosive. And then we heard Max Bella talk about the trust he has in him. So I think Drake Bowen continues to be one of the most valuable special teams players this year because he's bought into that role, and I think he continues to enhance his role in the Notre Dame defense.
And he's not really competing against Kaiser. He's competing against
No.
Viliamu-Asa at the Mike linebacker position. And that's a good situation for them. You've got two young linebackers, both good, both very promising, and we're going to see a lot of them again. However, and John, I wasn't watching what you were watching when you saw Bowen. I just haven't seen it, and I guess that's on me for not having eyes on Drake Bowen when Drake Bowen is showing everybody else that he's a quality football player. We have one practice left to see. That probably won't tell me anything from watching that, even if I watch Drake Bowen the whole time, because it probably won't be live stuff. So I guess me personally, I'm going to find out how good I think, or for whatever that's worth, or how good Drake Bowen really is when they turn the lights on against Texas A&M. I just haven't seen it with my eyes. With KVA, I have.
I also wonder if we are answering his question. In other words, Kaiser's gone next year. Is Bowen better off at will next to KVA? I think that's part of the question. I can't say that from what we've seen yet. I would guess Mike is his best position.
I would think so too. John?
Yeah, I think so. But I think you're seeing those guys grow and develop. KVA is going to be pretty impossible to keep off the field, and you want your best players on the field. But I think that Drake Bowen is continuing to grow and adding to his skill set. And I still think he's going to be a very, very valuable member of the Notre Dame defense this year and moving forward.
And moving forward, Snead and Osbury are will linebacker, types as well. So I guess as we look to the future, again, I would think Bowen would be a Mike, but we'll see. I personally am going to learn a lot about Drake Bowen coming up here real soon.
Next from Not J to Fell 1, Al Washington has talked about going 11 or 12 deep on the DL. Can you guess the pecking order of these 12 guys? Guys, how do you want to do it with Rubio? Just where he would be?
Yeah, let's do it with where he would be. And I put a note into ourselves here that you can't really answer this question putting the tackles and ends together. So we need to answer it separately. John, why don't you start the order of defensive ends? And this would be both sides of the line of scrimmage.
Well, I think that you're obviously starting with RJ Oben and sort of Jordan Botello as those first two edge guys. Then I think we're continuing to see Brennan Vernon come along. Where is Josh Burnham exactly in those? How quickly is Bryce Young factoring in there? I know they like Logan Thomas. We've seen him flash some. He's got to continue gaining weight, although he is up to about 225 pounds. So when you're at the edges, I think you're looking first and foremost at those six guys.
Tim, has Vernon settled in at an end position?
He's strong side defensive end, but I think he's fourth. I think just from talking to Washington, I tried to skip ahead to Bryce Young and he wouldn't let me. He said a colleague told me that Josh Burnham has had a fantastic camp. I would actually go on the ends. These three about the same snaps. That's what they're asking. Botello, Oben, and Burnham. I'd then jump a pretty big jump to the Traore range.
Yeah.
And then I drop again to the Tui Halamaka and Bryce Young range.
Yeah.
Tui Halamaka is the guy they're going to trust already. Bryce Young will probably play more as it goes on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that's my fault for a brain cramp on Boubacar because he has had a nice camp. That wasn't a deliberate omission on my part. That was just me. That was me failing that rep.
Yeah, I would say Oben, Botello, Burnham, Traore, and if Traore proves that he can rush the passer, he'll be moving up this list. And then Bryce Young, I think we're all excited to see him, and we heard some positive feedback about the Vipers in general the other day from L. Washington, which includes Junior Tuihalamaka. So it's a good situation there. How about defensive tackle, guys? And again,
Cross Mills.
with everybody being healthy. Yeah.
I mean, Cross Mills. I would go Rubio Onye, but I mean, very close. Heinisch. Big drop off. Armel Mukum.
Yeah, I think even if they were both healthy, I might have had Onye just ahead of Rubio. And I think there's some hope that Rubio can maybe be back by like the third weekend of September, something like that. That was one thing I heard on campus last week, that there is the potential, if it was like a 6-week recovery, that he might be positioned, even if it's just 10 or 12 snaps, he could potentially be back that third week of September, somewhere along those lines, last weekend of September. That would still give him up to 2/3 of the regular season if he's able to be back by the end of September. That would be significant for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's Cross and Mills. I know it's as good as any two starting defensive tackles in all of college football, in my opinion. Onye and Rubio, whenever he gets back healthy, I think give you two really, really quality number 2 DTs. Donovan Heinisch just finds a way to keep making plays. And, I can't even remember which player it was who told me the other day. I guess it was Mills. He was like, come on, he's a Heinisch. They just make plays. I thought that was really telling and really interesting. And it means we're really stupid to continue to doubt. But the guy just keeps making plays. And then Armel Mukum, I think we're all very intrigued by his progress. He is probably, in my opinion, one of the most pleasant surprises of camp. And again, we've seen one full practice and usually about 40 minutes of 4 or 5 additional practices after that time. But Mukum just keeps showing up and keeps working hard. They're working on him with leverage. They were doing some of those drills in the chute the other day, and he kept hitting his head, coming up a little too quick on the top of that trampoline like structure that they work under to get leverage and to better play with leverage and be mindful of pad level and things like that. But when he was striking his counterpart in the chest, you could tell there was some real strength behind it when he's firing off the ball and getting after it.
So that's 6 guys. I mean, that's 6
Yeah,
guys
that
that
Cole
you
Mullins
feel.
is 7th.
I would say Mullins and then Sevillano. Sevillano always catches my eye when I get eyes on him, and then Devin Houston.
Yeah.
Golden said Mullins' name without being asked. I'm just going to stick with that until I talk to him again.
Hey, that's
Devin,
I mean, we have to read the tea leaves sometimes, and when a coach does that, because there's a lot of times there are guys that go through an entire career and a coach never brings their name up.
That's for sure. They don't play a lot either.
No, no, they don't.
Devin Houston looks the part. Like he's got a nice frame. He's 6'4", up around 300 pounds. I did specifically notice him a little bit impeded the other day. I guess Saturday it was with a groin injury. He fired through a drill and then immediately came up a little soft and went and saw a trainer. And he did return to practice, but he was not the same.
I can't believe we're talking about Mukum before we go to the next question. When someone says, who's the surprise? He's the only surprise. You can't surprise me on Notre Dame's roster. We do this every minute of every day. I cannot believe we're talking about Armel Mukum, and we all should be. It's great. It's wonderful for Notre Dame. Cool number 2.
We have a question from K. Garrity 8, who I met at football practice the other day. It's good to meet him. In today's world of NIL and transfer portal chaos, how do you find the balance between going all in on high school players who could be game changers versus taking risks and knowing that you could potentially supplement with the portal if done correctly?
Well, this actually ties into what we talked about to close out the first segment. It's the Anthony Treesh edition. And it's the way that they're going to utilize him in the Notre Dame football program. And Notre Dame is going to kind of have its own proprietary scoring system, much like PFF, but it's going to be, again, Notre Dame's own scoring system that has been devised, and Treesh will help implement it. This is Bowden and Treesh working intimately together for it, and they will rank all of their players on the current roster. They will rank prospects with this score, and they will rank people that either are knowingly in the portal or that they expect to go into the portal. And so like I said, Trish will do self-scout and opponent scouting from an analytics standpoint, but he's going to be very, very intricately involved with Bowden in this scoring system that really outlines what Notre Dame thinks of its roster 1 through 85. I don't know if they're going to apply this scoring metric to the walk-ons. It wouldn't surprise me just with the sort of diabolical detail that Bowden attacks that job with. But this is very much where an Anthony Triche comes into play. So a really good question because it allows us to elaborate even a little bit more on how Notre Dame is approaching it and why Bowden and Marcus Freeman need all of this help. Marcus Freeman needs to be able to have a meeting with Chad Bowden in the evenings or whatever time they meet on a daily basis, and to say, look, here's where we're at. Here's where we're thinking. Here's our top 45 guys as we get ready to go to College Station and we're halfway through camp. This is how we've got them rated. Here's our next set of guys, and this is where we are on the recruiting trail.
Let's pretend we live in a world where Carr and Knight are on Notre Dame next year. The number one quarterback you want coming in cannot get a lot of money. You have to put the money somewhere else. If that ends up being a 1-year transfer at defensive tackle or another position, that's what you have to do. You have to look at your roster too. If you have Carr and Knight, you say, well, number one quarterback wants to come to Notre Dame. Can't offer him more money than Carr and Knight. That's not going to work. It's just not going to work. So you need to know your roster. Looking forward about, God, I guess 2 years. Is that too long? I guess 2 years.
I mean,
Noah
Grubbs is next in line then.
Yeah, but you can't pay him like you're paying Deuce Knight and CJ Carr.
I'm not saying you should or can.
Yeah.
No.
Right, or Riley Leonard. Well, I just think I've made this point. I'll use this question to interject here again. Notre Dame has to find a quarterback next year that can be a multi-year starter, and I think it can be CJ Carr with if he shows up. I think there will be a Deuce Knight package in 25. I think the guy's too talented. I think this coaching staff is too willing to play the players that can help it immediately. I think Mike Denbrock is so evolved. He has the ability as a coach to utilize 2 quarterbacks. But look, this is the 5th consecutive year that Notre Dame's going to have a different starting quarterback. You've got free agency in the NFL. There's not teams looking for a new quarterback every year. They want stability at that position. I think for Notre Dame, I believe Notre Dame can, should, and will be a playoff team in 24. I think for it to take the next step under Marcus Freeman starting in 25, it has to find, identify, and implement a starting quarterback that's more than one season. You cannot continue the quarterback rentals, I don't believe, and maintain long-term success.
I mean, clearly that's the plan, is to get away from that year by year. And they're in a good situation, especially if you can get Deuce Knight to come in here. You know, they've done a really good job the last few years of getting 7, 8, 9 transfers. Maybe with an Anthony Triche, that increases a little bit because you have somebody with eyes on it on a regular basis. Marcus Freeman has, when we met with him at the end of May, he doubled down on high school recruiting, and I agree with that. That's really important to do. And all I know is that when Trish comes up with this 1 through 85 ranking, let's see if we can get our hands on that before we start our counting down series heading into the summer.
Next question from Martin Evenflow. I'm skipping over one. Sorry. I'll go back to the other one. Martin Evenflow. Who is Notre Dame's sack leader this season? Great way of phrasing it. RJ Oben, Jordan Botello, Boubacar Traore, Jalen Sneed, or the field?
Well, I
mean, one of those guys or the field. How's that?
Oh, well, then I would take Oben. He's the most experienced. Al Washington said he's not just a pass rusher. He's an every down guy. He's going to be on the field more than everybody else. You know, I could see Traore getting hot and maybe getting more playing time, but I would definitely pick it's just so difficult to project a Sneed because Jalen Sneed, because you don't know, how much are they going to bring him off the edge? How they're going to probably blitz him a lot, along with KVA from the linebacker position, because that's what Al Golden wants to do. He's got a veteran defense, and so the more veteran his defense, the more confident he is in bringing guys from the second and third level. But I would say Oben just because he thrashes around in there and gets things done, and he's just going to get more snaps than everybody else.
I'm going to go Botello, even though I'm a sucker for field bets. I love versus the field. I think that's always a great opportunity to win a bet, but I will take Botello. Now, I say that with the caveat, and I reported this on Saturday, that RJ Oben, had such a good rep in some of those drills that Al Washington practically screamed like, "That's it! That's the rep right there. That's a defensive lineman right there. That's the way you burst off the ball. That's the way you fight to it and not, or fight through it and not just to it." So Oben's impressive, but I like Botello's demeanor. I like the fact that he is appearing to be prepared to play a more controlled version of his chaos. And I just think the guy's been around a long time. This is his chance. He seems much more mature. I'm taking Jordan Botello.
I'm dying to take the field, but I can't because it would have to be
Well, who do you
Burnham.
have in mind? Yeah, who do you?
It would be
Okay,
like
that's
Burnham,
right.
KVA,
Yeah,
Kaiser, and they're probably not going to lead the team in
right,
sacks.
right.
That's why you
Yeah.
can't really go there. I'm going to go with. God, it's tough.
Well,
I'm going
say
with Botello.
say
I'm
the
going
name.
Botello. I'm going
There you
Botello.
go. Solidarity, brother.
Yeah, I'm going Botello.
That's great. I hope you guys are right because if Botello leads the team in sacks, this team is going. This
Yeah.
defense is going to be killer, absolute killer, and it's time for him to do it. And I wouldn't be shocked at this stage just because of the transformation of his body and the veteran nature. And I think that it's it's time. I mean, it's well past due for Jordan Botello to put it all together, and I wouldn't be shocked if he did that. The question above that, Tim, right?
Yep.
VA Doc 88. Can you provide a refresher on the difference between boundary and field corners and perhaps which particular characteristics are needed for each? And since Morrison and Gray are boundary corners, is Notre Dame specifically trying to find another field corner to spell Mickey, or is Notre Dame trying to find the fourth best corner, irrespective of boundary or field?
I assume because of the situation with no Clarence Lewis, they're just trying to find the fourth best corner. And they'll make those three. I mean, Benjamin Morrison can go play the field if he has to. Christian Gray has been playing both. We haven't seen Mickey do it, but if Mickey can, I think you're just trying to find the fourth best corner. And I think I'm pretty sure I'm gonna let you lead into this one because I know who you're gonna say. I talked to Mike Mickens about it. The boundary is kind of what you think. There's a lot more one-on-one. It's the guy that has the long arms, your best cover corner athleticism. He doesn't usually have as much help from the linebacker or the safety because the field cornerback has the rover or the nickel, what it really is. So that's why Morrison and Gray are great for boundary corners. I mean,
And
they look
he's
like boundary corners.
and the boundary corners usually is defending the boundary wideout is usually the longest of the receivers out there.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Benjamin Morrison can play. Benjamin Morrison could start at 5 positions for Notre Dame.
That's true. Yes, he could play plenty of positions. So that's why I think the fourth guy is they would just want the fourth best guy, the next guy that's the fourth best guy.
Yeah, and I think that's what I want. I think it's going to be Leonard Moore.
I tend to agree.
I agree. I agree. Based on just the little buzz that's percolated around him in camp, I think that he's further ahead than Hobbs right now.
What else can we say? Field corners are, again, just the stereotype. It doesn't mean it follows the pattern all the time. But the field, yeah, no,
Hart doesn't
exactly.
follow stereotype here at all.
But again, you had Hart and Morrison again could play either position.
Yes.
Great play, and they can play it great. So, but generally, the boundary corner is a little bit longer because he's defending a longer guy, and the field corner maybe isn't quite as long. He's got a little bit more field to cover, so he's got to be a little bit more nimble. But you can't use Morrison and Hart as examples because they were and are premier college football players. You can play them anywhere.
There's a lot. I should go to the board for this one, but there's a lot of leverage involved, according to Mickens, with the field corner because if you think about it, think about all the space you have. So if you line up on the outside shoulder, in other words, you're giving up the inside, but you cannot give up the outside. If you line up on the inside shoulder, he's got to go outside, but then you have to be able to play him in man coverage and find the ball. I think this came up because I put was it Monday Musing or a practice report that I thought Mickey might start in A&M as the field and Morrison the boundary because Gray can seamlessly back up both, and it's you need 3 guys playing out there in the 100-degree heat, and someone's thought,
yeah.
I mean, if it's close, I don't mean if Gray has been way better in camp than Mickey. I'm saying if it's close. I've never seen Mickey go over and play boundary other than I'm sure he does it in the spring, but they all move around the spring. So that was my whole point. Not like a whole season thing. I didn't think of it that way. I just thought you need 3. So
Gray's going to be a real top-notch field corner for Notre Dame. No doubt about it.
Next from JRP3, and we can all answer this one. I'll let you guys go first. T.O., I was intrigued earlier this week when you mentioned before speaking to Gaduli that you knew what questions to ask to get a good feel for how Carr and Minchie were developing. And hey, it worked out, by the way. It's not the first time you or another staff member has alluded to phrasing questions the right way or asking specific questions to prompt legitimate answers rather than coach speak. What sort of questions tend to yield the best results? Then he says, is there a certain magic as to how you construct a question to induce a better answer?
Well, I learned at a very early age that interviewing Mark Bavaro at Notre Dame is an impossible task. I saw him years later when he came in when Charlie Weiss was coaching, and of course they were close with the New York Giants. And I said, man, dude, you were the hardest. I was 23 years old trying to ask the closed mouth Mark Bavaro questions, and it didn't work very well. But are there tricks of the trade? Yeah, I learned with Joe Moore that again at an early age that you don't dare ask him a yes no question because that's exactly how he will answer it. And that's a great barometer. You don't ask yes no questions unless you've got a good rapport and you need a yes no answer because it gives an interviewee an out from answering it. So, you come prepared, you come well educated in what you want to ask and what the topic is and the specific person that you're interviewing. Yeah, you learn tricks along the way but I think mainly it's just ask intelligent questions and be smart and try to show that the person that you're asking a question knows that you're legit.
Yeah. For me, the number one, don't ask yes, no questions because you're deservedly going to get a bunch of yes, no answers. I think the other thing is we all inevitably will ask a bad question or phrase a question very poorly. How do we evolve from that? And then to me, might be the biggest thing. And anyone who knows me an ounce knows that I have terminal stubborn. I'll never give up being stubborn. But you have to be willing to be reflexive and flexible in an interview and not be so tied to the questions you think you want to ask that you miss a coach or a player saying something good that you can then peel off a different direction and ask a question off of that. And the other day I knew I wanted to ask Max Bulla about the depth and detail of this defense and maybe how it compared to the NFL. But then when he gave me a great answer about how he also believed the Notre Dame defense is actually deeper than the NFL defense, I had to be prepared to pivot off of that while I was visiting with him. So to me, it's don't ask those yes, no questions and don't get so bogged down in the notes you've made of what you think you might want to ask that you miss a coach or a player saying some really good stuff that you can peel off of.
And also, you got to be careful about asking in general who's impressing because Marcus Freeman will just tell you, oh, they're all impressing, and no name will come out for 5 minutes. Yeah. It's really impressive.
So you need to name names and ask.
Yes, and you have to find a way that they can't answer what does he need to improve on, just his consistency, because that is actually not a trait. That is part of life. So you have to find a way to phrase it so no one can say the players. And I've actually said players during camp before. But someone asked the question like, what are you better at? And I gotta say, and don't say consistency. It doesn't count. There's something you're better at. The problem is coaches don't want to tell you what they have to work on because other people can hear that. So really that doesn't work well with Marcus Freeman either. What does someone have to work on? Oh, just being more consistent, everything. I tell you what, Max Bulla tells you stuff. Al Washington now tells you stuff, although Al will be nice about the players that are not in the mix, and you can kind of tell. Mike Elston just was mean about the players not in the mix. It was kind of
fun. I before we move to the next question, I wanted to declare that this is my 43rd year covering Notre Dame football, and I am the next question away from asking a stupid question. It can happen that easily, or the words don't come out.
We need Pete Sampson here for our 2012. Remember when they went about 6-0, and somebody would always lead off with 7-0, huh? Like that's not a question. You're just stating the record. It's a good
no. Yeah, don't say talk about, please. That's not a question. That's a pet peeve.
Yeah, I have never intentionally said talk about, but I think it slipped out a couple times along the way.
Well, and at least you can say, like, can you talk about what makes Mitchell Evans such a difficult
Yes. Or
matchup?
can you
Yeah.
That's
tell us
entirely
what it
different.
makes?
Yeah. Can
Then
you
talk about the
educate us?
defense.
We're basically going there groveling in any press setting to come out smarter so that we can better serve the audiences on the respective platforms that we're trying to serve.
You know
I
what's
think
ironic here, Priester? Sorry to interrupt. Last year when they were playing NC State with Armstrong, a reporter asked a question about Armstrong's unique mobility. And he's like, and coming down the road, you have another guy, Riley Leonard, that's like that. And Al Golden was like, you want me to talk about Riley Leonard now in week 3? And now Riley Leonard's on his team. So it's really a strange situation. Yeah. And Al Golden, some guys don't suffer bad questions. Some people are really polite about it. Some people are not. I kind of like the ones that are not polite about it. It's more fun. When there's a bad question, you can tell they don't like it. Freeman will be nice to
yeah,
any
he will
question,
almost
basically.
always. Yeah. Yeah. L not so much. Well, because, and in fair, and he and I kind of clashed a little bit last year, but in fairness, the dude's dialed in, man. He doesn't
Yeah.
want to he doesn't want to be interviewed. He doesn't want to talk about too much. He doesn't want to give anything away. He just wants to go to his office after practice, go over the practice tape and get ready for the next thing that he has to teach his players. And so I get that. I respect that
Yeah.
a whole bunch. And he's a great coach. But, we are all one question away from saying something stupid to a coach. I know I am. We have a question from Perry to AJ. How significant is the loss for Texas A&M running back Reuben Owens going into week 1 versus Notre Dame? Will this change much of the defensive game plan that Notre Dame employs?
I don't think it changes much of the defensive game plan, but as I already shared earlier in the pod after communicating with an NFL scout that was in College Station last week, the first thing he talked about for their offense were the 2 running backs, and that's sliced in half. So I don't think it changes what Notre Dame expects to need to do from a defensive game plan standpoint. I do think it's a significant loss for Texas A&M.
Yeah, I think it shows up for Texas A&M's game plan, actually, because the fourth quarter, when you have 2 of them, it's a lot better for your running game. When people say, oh, he was slated to be the backup, well, Jadarian Price is out for Notre Dame. How do you feel about that right now? Not a
Exactly.
backup.
Yeah.
That
No,
is a
exactly.
tough situation for the fourth quarter for Texas A&M.
JB, I'm a little curious. You referenced it in the first segment. You said their top 2 running backs. I see different depth charts with Amari Daniels and Le'Veon Moss as the top 2 with Reuben Owens third. Now I have seen film of Reuben Owens, and his numbers do not do justice to the type of player that he is going to be or was going to be this year. He was a freshman last year because he was second on the team behind Daniels in carries. He had 101. He only averaged 3.8 yards per carry. And I went and looked at the 10 FBS teams that they played, and he averaged 2.9 yards per carry. Now, a lot of that is on the offensive line. Texas A&M did not have a good offensive line last year, but I have seen the best of Reuben Owens, and he's a good running back. His numbers didn't reflect it last year because of several reasons, but yeah, it's a loss. And Tim, that was exactly what I was going to say, is that Jadarian Price may not start, but you don't,
You want to lose him?
you don't want to lose a guy of that magnitude. And Owens is, we had a couple people on our message board say he's a breakaway back, and I watched this film, and his longest run against an FBS team was just 16 yards. But if you watch his film, he's a really good player. So that's a
Yeah, he
blow. I
was.
don't think it
Yeah.
changes anything game plan wise, but yeah, JB.
No, I was just going to say it's a significant loss. He was a freshman All SEC or All SEC freshman performer a year ago. He had like 750 all-purpose yards for the Aggies, and I guess I still have some bias of noticing him in recruiting, and I'll never claim to be as deep and knowledgeable on that as Kevin Sinclair and Tom Loy and Eric Thomas, but he just stood out to me in his recruitment. He's a former consensus 5-star prospect, I believe. He's the guy that you look at and think he's really, really good, and he has that potential to blow any given play wide open.
Question from Irish Boy 1. How would you rate the expectations for Riley Leonard going into the season compared to Sam Hartman last year? Is more expected of Leonard now than was expected of Hartman prior to the start of last season? I think our vantage point on Hartman changed because of what
Yes.
we saw during the season, but my expectations were very high for him last year. I don't know about you
Me too.
guys.
I have no change preseason. The hindsight 2020 and everything that happened, my expectations were way higher than Riley Leonard. But no, I had extremely high expectations for Sam Hartman. I
Yeah,
can't even fake that.
I would say the same, especially after the first couple of the games of the season. You felt like it, and and then when he had that one throw to Mitchell Evans against Ohio State, where you're just like, okay, this guy could be someone who takes him to the next level, and then for myriad reasons, it didn't work out that way. I have really high expectations for Riley Leonard, probably even more so after visiting with him on Saturday, just because I really like the way he carries himself. I like the way he's put together. And I think that, and we keep seeing Notre Dame tease us with glimpses of it on social media. He's got a chance to win some games for Notre Dame with his legs. And you talk to these Notre Dame defensive coaches, they will point back to the Duke game and talk about how they just fought for their lives to keep him from completely carrying Duke to the win in that contest. There's a reverence that this defensive coaching staff has for Riley Leonard because they faced him last year and saw what he did to them.
I tell you, my expectations for him are higher than before we met him. And I look, what you say in interviews and press conferences, that's not going to win games for you,
No,
but it does provide you an insight into the head and the heart of a football player. And I think when you're talking about specifically this young man and his personality and his motivation, the way he's endeared himself to his teammates, my expectations are very high for him. Now, are they 68 to 70% completion expectations? No, but there's more to the game than just flat out, pure accuracy. And but I think his accuracy is going to be good enough, especially when you incorporate all the other aspects of his game, his legs, absolutely, and then just his leadership. And when you're surrounded by players that love you and respect you, that's going to make you a better football player. That's going to help the quarterback be a better quarterback.
so I'm going way over my skis here, Tim, because he's the best leader they've ever had and the most respected leader they've ever had. But the wild, let's make a crazy comparison vibe of Riley Leonard and how people will respect his toughness and how he plays is Tony Rice.
Yeah, Tony Rice was a spectacular
I went over the
competitor.
top, but that's the most respected guy I can think of where the whole team would have died for Tony Rice during those 2
Yeah,
years
and
when he started.
I'm thankful that Riley Leonard is way more accurate throwing the football than Tony
Yes,
Rice.
but well, I know, but the
Anybody
thing
out there
is,
anybody out there that knows Tony, you can go ahead and tell him I said that. But no, what you're saying, Tim, is absolutely right. They would have done everything for him. Lou Holtz spotted him on the high school fields in South Carolina, and immediately knew that that's who he wanted to be his leader. And
I think it's a big deal that Riley Leonard showed up and was talking to walk-ons by their name the day he arrived. Like Gino Gaduli brought that up. He came the day he got there, he had memorized everyone's name and face, and he could address them by their name. And this is Riley Leonard walking in as a grad transfer. I mean,
yeah,
that's a unique way of going about things, because you don't have to do that at all.
he is a perfect fit for Notre Dame.
Now
Now
he just has to throw
yeah,
touchdowns and not interceptions and be all good.
exactly right. We're going to wrap up with a question from Irish fan 102. Where would each of the following players rank on the depth chart this season based off their final season at Notre Dame? It's an interesting question. We're
It
talking
is.
receivers. We're talking receivers, and the former receivers thrown out by Irish fan 102 were Chris Fink, Miles Boykin, and Rico Flores. Where would Chris Fink be on this depth chart at the slot receiver?
I think just in the mix with the other slot receivers. Part of the mix. He would be part of the mix, though. They would be playing Chris Fink because he's gets open and catches passes. We can't prove that. Jordan Faison, we all love Jordan Faison. He hasn't gotten open and caught a lot of passes on third down yet. Chris Fink did, and did it against Michigan.
Yeah.
Jaden Harrison spent a career not catching passes as much as we love him. So I think I like Faison and Harrison probably better than Fink going in, but Fink has a different skill set. He was a pure receiver.
Let me just throw. I'm sorry, John. Let me throw this in. If Fink was here, Faison would strictly be an X.
Yes, that's a good call.
JB?
Yeah, I was going to make a similar comment and just say He wouldn't be ahead of Great House,
Mm-mm.
but he would probably be your next slot receiver, which would put him somewhere around fifth or so on the depth chart overall. So
How about Miles Boykin? Now, again, we know that he's going to, the way the question is asked, right? We know that he's going to have a great last year at Notre Dame.
I'd say he would start.
Yeah.
At W ahead of Collins and Thomas. Without a doubt, I think he would start ahead of Collins and but that's not fair. Collins and Thomas are playing their senior years, and Miles
Right.
Boykin, the
And he
junior,
didn't
wasn't playing
right.
ahead of either
And
one of
we
them.
didn't
So
and we didn't think that way about Boykin necessarily going into that season.
no, but
So,
the staff did. As soon as he had that LSU game, they're like, "This
right.
guy, no, they
Right.
talked to him with reverence, and everybody else was trying to figure out
Right.
their
What do you think, John?
yeah, so I wanted to quickly look up Miles Boykin's senior season stats or last season stats at Notre Dame. He had 59 catches for 872 yards, along of 40 and 8 touchdowns. I think Miles Boykin would be one of your top 2 receivers
Yeah.
on this class. Yeah, or on this roster, on this team. He would be an absolute starter, and he would probably be one of your top 2 targets, in my opinion.
And then Rico Flores playing the X.
just in the mix, right?
Yeah, I think he'd be in your top 6.
Yeah.
But much like Fink, I think he would be around 5 or 6. He's not. Now, look, I think
He could be 7 too. He really could be, but but they'd extend to 7 and he'd be in the mix. That's the difference. Like he would.
yeah, I think you'd have to see, because I will say, Rico Flores was really solid technically. Like he'd done a lot of training with Lemuel Adams out in California, and he's trained a bunch of pros in different components. And so I did like the way that Rico approached the game. I don't remember seeing Rico have a bunch of bad practices with a bunch of dropped balls. So
No, I agree.
he would absolutely be in the rotation and probably would start some games this year for Notre Dame, but he wouldn't be relied upon the way he was last year.
Yeah, I take it back, JB. He was too tough not to emerge as one of the guys,
Correct.
physically and mentally tough. But it's a hard one because they wouldn't even have Chris Mitchell if Rico Flores stayed. They wouldn't have gone out and gotten the X. So
That's true. And Rico Flores was, I know everybody got bitter towards him when he left abruptly immediately after the conclusion of the regular season, but the kid's a warrior. And I respect that and appreciate that. He'd probably be behind Mitchell. No, I just said Faison. I guess if all of these guys are in it.
All right. I need to see Chris Mitchell like you need to see Drake Bowen.
Yeah, that's me.
That's
I
fair.
need to see Chris
I was politely saying that.
Yeah.
No,
You're not
that's
supposed to be the
fair.
polite one.
No, and I feel similarly because he trots out there. It appears that he trots out there with the first team, but I haven't seen first team productivity in practice. But again, we see a snippet of what they do. And I'm not going to say, oh yes, he's going to be great if I haven't seen it. I mean, that's the way I've always looked at it. So,
Guess
and
what?
I do think to Chris Mitchell. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tio.
No, I was just going to say, time to phrase a question to Mike Brown to get the correct answer out of Chris Mitchell.
I was just going to say, I will say to Chris Mitchell's credit, I saw him a couple of three practices ago with a bad drop, and then come back and make a sensational catch where he plucked the ball right off the turf on a low throw, and not only made the catch, but then kept his balance, kept his feet, and was able to turn upfield in that particular drill.
and again, if one of the 3 wideout positions is a little lean in terms of experience, it is the X position. So Rico Flores could play. Rico Flores could absolutely play on this team. He's a warrior, and I do wish him good luck. Well, we're going to wrap it up with that. I'm going to try to get the day and the date correct here. We will come back on Thursday, and if I ever do that again, stop me, guys. Please do. What are we going to be able to do it Thursday?
We have practice access. We have instant analysis, and I'm leaving for Milwaukee, so we might not be coming back on Thursday.
You're right. You're right. Well, we're going to have to try to. Well, we're going to let you know. What can I say? We're going to let you know. It's probably going to have to be Friday then. We'll check schedules, but we'll keep everybody appraised as to what exactly we're doing with our next Irish Illustrated Insider. And until then, I'm Tim Priester with Tim O'Malley and John Bryce, and this has been Irish Illustrated Insider.